I never expected a simple text from my daughter Amanda to shatter my entire world. "Mom, take the old photo album and leave the house." My heart raced as I read her next message. "Before they find it." Without questioning, I grabbed the unfamiliar album from behind our bookshelf and fled our home of 40 years. Hours later, in a dingy motel room, I finally opened it. Inside were photographs documenting a murder from the early 80s, with my husband Frank standing over the body. My hands trembled as realization dawned. My marriage, my life, everything I believed true was built on blood. And now, powerful people would kill to keep it buried. Just last week, I was Anastasia Caldwell, 65 years old, and living what I thought was a blessed life. Frank and I had recently celebrated our 40th anniversary with a small garden party in our backyard in Cedar Springs. Our Tudor-style home on Maple Avenue had been our sanctuary since Frank's retirement from his judgeship 5 years ago. After 30 years on the bench, my husband had earned his reputation as one of the most respected legal minds in the state. I spent my days tending to my prized hydrangeas, hosting our neighborhood book club every Thursday, and volunteering at the local literacy center twice a week. Frank would often joke that retirement suited me better than him, but he kept busy with his golf games and occasional consulting work for his family's law firm. Our daughter Amanda lived 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., where she worked as a digital forensic investigator for the FBI. She had her father's analytical mind and my stubborn determination. Though I missed having her close by, I took pride in her important work and independence. We spoke on the phone every Sunday evening, a tradition we'd maintained since her college days. Frank came from one of those old money families whose name appeared on buildings downtown. The Caldwells had been in Cedar Springs for 6 generations. His father had been a state senator, his grandfather a federal judge. Politics and law were the family business, and expectations were high for each new generation. Our nephew, Gregory, was currently running for state senate, following the path his grandfather had taken. Our life together had seemed so normal, so perfect, but looking back, I can see the small cracks that had been forming. It started with the phone calls. Hang-ups in the middle of the night, or sometimes just silence on the other end of the line. Frank dismissed them as telemarketers, but they always left me unsettled. Then there was the black sedan, I noticed, parked across the street several times, never the same driver, but always watching our house. Frank had been changing too. More secretive phone calls taken in his study with the door closed. More meetings with his brother Richard that he wouldn't discuss. More drinks before dinner, something he'd rarely done before. 3 weeks ago, I came downstairs at 2 a.m. to find Frank in our basement storage room, surrounded by open boxes, frantically searching through decades of family paperwork. "What are you doing, Frank?" I asked from the doorway, startling him. He quickly closed the box he'd been digging through. "Just looking for some old financial records, Annie. Go back to bed." I knew he was lying. Frank had been meticulous about our financial records, keeping everything in labeled files in his office. But I didn't press him. The next day, Frank insisted we attend Gregory's fundraising gala, even though we'd already sent our regrets due to Frank's supposed back pain. "Family needs to show a united front," he said firmly. The event was filled with the state's political elite, and I couldn't help noticing the intense conversations between Frank, Richard, and several men I recognized from the governor's office. One evening, while Frank was showering, his phone lit up with a text message. I shouldn't have looked, but something urged me to. The message, from a number not saved in his contacts, read, "We need to contain this situation before it spreads. Make sure she doesn't suspect anything." I placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it, my heart racing. Who was she? What situation needed containing? The following morning, while Frank was at his weekly breakfast meeting with Richard, I searched his office. In the back of his desk drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom I'd never known existed, I found a cheap burner phone. The messages made my blood run cold. The evidence might still exist. We need to know if she's planning to talk. 40 years is a long time, but some things never go away. Do whatever's necessary to keep this quiet. I carefully replaced the phone, my mind spinning with questions I was too afraid to ask. Frank had secrets, dangerous ones, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt truly afraid of what my husband might be capable of. 2 days later, while Frank was meeting with Richard yet again, my own phone chimed with a text message from Amanda. "Mom, take the old photo album and leave the house." I stared at the screen, confused. Before I could respond, another message appeared, the one behind the encyclopedia set on the third shelf in Dad's study. "Take it and go. Now." My fingers trembled as I typed. "Amanda, what's going on?" Her response was immediate. "Before they find it. Don't tell Dad. Don't tell anyone. Go to the Pinewood Motel on Route 30 in Millbrook. Room 14. Key under the mat. I'll call when safe." I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. 3 attempts, same result. Despite my confusion, a deep maternal instinct told me to trust my daughter. If Amanda was worried enough to send these messages, something was terribly wrong. I moved quickly to Frank's study, scanning the bookshelves. Behind the dusty encyclopedia, set on the third shelf, just as Amanda had said, was an album I'd never seen before. Dark blue with no markings on the spine. It was heavier than I expected. I slipped the album into my tote bag, then grabbed my purse, phone charger, and a small overnight bag I kept packed for spontaneous visits to Amanda. In 15 minutes, I was in my car heading out of Cedar Springs. As I drove, questions swirled through my mind. What was in this album? Why did Amanda want me to leave so urgently? Was this connected to Frank's strange behavior? I followed Amanda's instructions precisely, taking back roads instead of the highway, stopping once for gas and paying with cash. The Pinewood Motel was exactly as depressing as its name suggested. A single-story building with peeling paint and flickering neon. I found room 14 at the end of the row, key right where Amanda said it would be. The room smelled of cigarettes and cheap air freshener. I locked the door, fastened the chain, and pulled the dingy curtains closed before sitting on the edge of the bed with the mysterious album. For several minutes, I just stared at it, afraid of what I might find inside. Finally, I opened the cover. The first pages contained newspaper clippings from the Cedar Springs Gazette, dating back to June 1980. The headline on the largest clipping read, "Local student missing. Foul play suspected." Below was a photo of a young woman with feathered hair and a bright smile. Bethany Marshall, 20, a junior at Cedar Springs University. I flipped through more clippings documenting the search for Bethany, interviews with her distraught parents, and speculation about her disappearance. The final article, dated September 1980, announced that the active search had been scaled back, though the case remained open. Between the newspaper clippings were handwritten notes in unfamiliar handwriting, listing names of people interviewed, potential leads, and questions about inconsistent statements. One name appeared repeatedly: Richard Caldwell. My hands began to shake as I turned to the next section. Here were photographs, not family photos, but what looked like surveillance shots. Frank, much younger, entering and leaving various buildings. Richard, with other young men I didn't recognize, locations around the university campus. The final pages contained photos that appeared to be from a party: beer cans, young men in fraternity shirts, young women dancing. Then, a series of photos that made my stomach lurch. Frank, Richard, and 3 other men standing over what appeared to be an unconscious young woman on a couch. In the next photo, they were carrying her out a back door. The final photo showed them loading something wrapped in a tarp into the trunk of a car. The date stamp on the back of the final photo: June 12th, 1980, the day Bethany Marshall disappeared. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. When I returned to the bed, my phone was ringing. Amanda. Mom? Her voice was tight with stress. Did you get out? Do you have the album? Yes, I whispered, my voice barely working. Amanda, what is this? These pictures. I can't explain everything now. Our calls might be monitored. But Dad's family is involved in something terrible, and they know I've found evidence. Someone at the Bureau is feeding them information. You need to stay hidden. The girl in these photos, Bethany Marshall, is she? Yes, Amanda said quietly. And there's more. Look at the back cover of the album, Mom. There's a memory card taped inside. I checked, and sure enough, a small SD card was secured with tape to the inside of the back cover. Find a way to view that, Amanda instructed. But be careful. I have to go. I'll contact you tomorrow. Amanda, wait. But she had already hung up. I sat in that dreary motel room, staring at the phone, then at the album, then at the memory card in my palm. My entire life, with Frank flashed before my eyes. Our wedding day, Amanda's birth, holidays, anniversaries, all now cast in shadow by whatever terrible truth was unfolding around me. I needed to see what was on the memory card, but I had no way to view it. After considering my options, I walked to the motel office and purchased a cheap tablet from the vending machine using cash. Back in my room, I inserted the memory card and discovered several audio files and scanned documents. I opened the first audio file, and my heart nearly stopped when I heard Frank's voice. The recording was poor quality, clearly made secretly, but the content was unmistakable. It was Richard who did it, Frank's voice said. I just helped clean up afterward. We didn't mean for the girl to die, she hit her head when Richard pushed her. She'd been threatening to go public about what happened at the fraternity houses. Said she had proof of the assaults. We couldn't let her ruin our futures over a bunch of drunk college parties. Another voice I didn't recognize asked, "And you're sure nobody else knows?" "Nobody who'd talk," Frank replied. The detective originally assigned to the case got too close, but Dad took care of it. Had him removed from the case, threatened his pension. The Marshall girl's family eventually moved away. It's buried. I listened to file after file, each one revealing more of the terrible truth. Frank's fraternity brothers had been drugging and assaulting women at parties for years. Bethany had evidence and threatened to expose them. At a confrontation that night, Richard had pushed her, causing her to fall and hit her head fatally. Instead of calling for help, they covered it up. The scanned documents included police reports with key details omitted, witness statements that had been altered, and memos showing how the Caldwell family had used their influence to steer the investigation away from Richard and Frank. Unable to process everything I was learning, I searched online for information about Bethany Marshall. Most articles were just brief mentions of her disappearance, but one detailed feature from 5 years ago caught my attention. It had been written for the 30th anniversary of her disappearance and included an interview with her younger sister, Caroline, who had never given up looking for answers. The article mentioned that Caroline now lived in Portland and ran a support group for families of missing persons. There was a photo of Caroline holding a picture of Bethany, and the family resemblance was striking the same wide-set eyes and determined expression. As morning approached, Amanda finally called back. "Mom, are you okay? Did you look at the files?" "Yes," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't believe Frank. How could he live with this for 40 years? How could he look me in the eye every day knowing what he'd done?" "I'm so sorry, Mom," Amanda's voice cracked. "I discovered it while working on a project digitizing cold cases. I recognized Grandpa's name in some of the documents, and then I found connections to Dad and Uncle Richard. I started digging deeper, and—" She paused. "Someone noticed my searches. Yesterday, my supervisor pulled me aside to tell me that someone from upstairs was asking about my recent case inquiries. That's when you texted me," I said, understanding. "Yes. The album belonged to Detective James Mercer, the original investigator. He kept his own records separate from the official files because he suspected interference. After he was forced off the case, he continued investigating privately, but never found enough proof to overcome the Caldwell influence. When he died last year, his daughter found the album and sent it to the FBI anonymously. But how did it end up in our house? In Frank's study? From what I can tell, someone at the Bureau alerted the Caldwells about the new evidence. Dad must have intercepted it somehow. I don't think he knew what was on the memory card, though. The implications were staggering. Not only had Frank participated in covering up Bethany's death, but he was actively working to suppress evidence even now. Mom, listen to me carefully. You need to stay hidden. Dad's family has connections everywhere. Police, local government, even some federal agencies. They've built their power on burying this secret, and they'll do anything to keep it that way. But Amanda, what about you? If they know you've been investigating, I've taken precautions, she said, but I could hear the worry in her voice. What matters now is keeping that evidence safe and finding a way to expose the truth without getting either of us killed. After we hung up, I spent hours reading news archives about the Caldwell family. Over the decades, 3 people connected to Bethany's case had died under suspicious circumstances: a former fraternity member killed in a single-car accident, a janitor who'd been working at the fraternity house the night of Bethany's disappearance, found dead of an apparent overdose, and a former girlfriend of Richard's who died in a house fire. My phone buzzed with an alert from my banking app. Someone had attempted to access my accounts. Then, another alert that my credit card had been used at a gas station 60 miles away. They were trying to track me. I removed the battery from my phone, paid for another night at the motel in cash, and tried to think clearly through my fear. This wasn't just about a 40-year-old crime anymore. This was about a powerful family willing to do anything to protect their secrets. A family I had been part of for decades, without ever knowing their true nature. By my 3rd day in hiding, I was running on fear and determination. I'd purchased a prepaid phone and called Amanda only at scheduled times from different locations. During one call, she gave me terrible news. "They're watching my apartment. 2 men in a black SUV have been parked outside since yesterday. I'm staying with a colleague." "Amanda, should we go to the police?" Her bitter laugh cut through the line. "Which police, Mom? The ones Uncle Richard plays golf with? The department where Dad's former clerk is now the chief? Or the state police that Gregory's campaign has been funding?" She was right, of course. The Caldwell influence ran deep. I checked out of the Pinewood Motel and moved to a small bed and breakfast 20 miles further away, paying cash and using a false name. I kept the album and the tablet with me at all times. That afternoon, while getting coffee at a diner, I glimpsed the local news on the television. Frank was making a public plea for information about my disappearance. "My wife has been missing for 3 days," he said, his voice breaking convincingly. "She left without explanation and hasn't contacted anyone. We're deeply concerned about her mental state. Anastasia, if you're watching this, please come home. Whatever's troubling you, we can work through it together." The performance was masterful, the concerned husband. The suggestion that I was mentally unstable. It was a preemptive move to discredit anything I might say. The news anchor mentioned that the Caldwell family was offering a substantial reward for information leading to my safe return. What she didn't say, but I understood clearly, was that this ensured dozens of people would now be looking for me, reporting any sightings. I needed help from someone with no connections to the Caldwells. Using the prepaid phone, I searched for information about Detective James Mercer. He had retired to a small town called Riverton, about 80 miles away. An obituary from 10 months earlier mentioned he was survived by his daughter, Linda Mercer. I found her address through an online directory and drove to Riverton that evening. Linda Mercer lived in a modest bungalow on a quiet street. When she opened the door to my knock, her eyes widened with recognition. "You're Anastasia Caldwell," she said. "You're all over the news." "Please," I said. "I need to talk to you about your father's investigation, about Bethany Marshall." She hesitated, then stepped back to let me in. "Dad never stopped looking for justice for that girl," she said as she led me to her kitchen. "It haunted him his whole career." For the next 2 hours, Linda shared everything she knew. Her father had kept detailed records separate from the official investigation, suspecting the Caldwells were influencing the case. He'd been threatened, demoted, and eventually forced into early retirement when he wouldn't drop it. After Dad died, I found all his old case files. When I realized what they contained, I sent copies to the FBI anonymously. I thought maybe after all these years, with the old guard retired or dead, someone might finally look into it. That someone was my daughter, I told her. "She's an FBI analyst who found your father's files and started investigating." Linda's eyes widened. "Does Frank know about this?" "He knows something. Amanda believes someone at the FBI alerted the family that the case was being looked at again. That would explain the break-in," Linda said quietly. "Break-in? 2 months ago, someone broke into this house. Nothing valuable was taken, but Dad's home office was ransacked. I assumed they were looking for drugs, but maybe. They were looking for your father's evidence," I finished. Linda nodded grimly. "They wouldn't have found much. Dad kept his most important records elsewhere." She disappeared into a back room and returned with a small fireproof lockbox. "He gave me this key years ago, told me if anything ever happened to him, I should give this to someone I trusted who could get it to the right authorities." She hesitated. "I'm not sure that's you, Mrs. Caldwell." "It's not," I agreed. "But my daughter is FBI, and she's already risking everything to expose the truth. If your father's additional evidence could help." Linda studied me for a long moment, then handed me the key. "Dad always said the truth would come out eventually. I hope for Bethany's sake he was right." Inside the box were more photographs, handwritten witness statements that didn't match the official reports, and a small notebook with names and dates. Most significantly, there was a list of other young women who had reported being drugged or assaulted at parties attended by the Caldwell brothers and their fraternity. As I was examining the contents, Linda's phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to me, face pale. "That was my neighbor. There's a black SUV parked at the end of my street, and 2 men are asking about out-of-town visitors." My blood ran cold. How did they find me? License plate readers, maybe? Or they're just checking everyone connected to the original case. She moved to the window and peeked out. "You need to leave. Now, through the back. She led me through her backyard to an alley where I'd parked my car. Be careful, she warned. These people have had 40 years to perfect covering their tracks. I drove aimlessly for hours, too afraid to stop anywhere. My prepaid phone rang just after midnight. Mom? Amanda's voice was tight with fear. Are you safe? For now. What's wrong? They've issued a warrant for my arrest. Evidence tampering and obstruction of justice. It's all fabricated, but my supervisor says they have enough to make it stick. I'm being set up. My daughter was about to be destroyed for trying to uncover the truth. What can I do? I asked. Stay hidden. Keep the evidence safe. I've contacted someone who might help us, a journalist named Sofia Rivera, who's been investigating corruption in the state government. She's looking into the Caldwells independently. But Amanda, what about you? I'm turning myself in, she said firmly. If I run, it just makes me look guilty. My lawyer says we can fight this, but it's going to get ugly before it gets better. After we hung up, I sat in my parked car and wept for the first time since this nightmare began. Then I wiped my tears and made a decision. I was done running. It was time to fight back. The next morning, news broke of Amanda's arrest. The charges were technical and complex, designed to confuse the public unauthorized access to federal databases, mishandling of evidence, and obstruction of justice. The subtext was clear. She was being painted as a rogue agent with a personal vendetta. I watched Frank give another press conference, standing alongside Richard and Gregory, all three men expressing deep concern about Amanda's mental state and promising to support her through this difficult time. Their performance was flawless, a united family concerned about their troubled daughter divided by niece. It made me physically ill. Using information from Detective Mercer's files, I made two critical connections. First, I located Bethany Marshall's sister Caroline in Portland and left a message with her support group. Second, I reached out to Sofia Rivera, the journalist Amanda had mentioned. Sofia agreed to meet me at a truck stop 50 miles outside Cedar Springs. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Amanda sent me some documentation before her arrest, she said after we'd settled in a corner booth. Enough to convince me there's a story here, but not enough to publish anything yet. I have more, I told her, showing her the album and Detective Mercer's files. 40 years of evidence about a murder and cover-up that built the Caldwell family's power. Sofia examined the materials carefully. This is compelling, but we need more to overcome the Caldwell influence. They'll claim the photos are ambiguous, the audio recordings doctored. And the moment we go public, they'll destroy any credibility we have. Then we need to be smart about how we do this, I said with a determination that surprised even me. We need more witnesses, more evidence, and we need to protect ourselves while we gather it. Sofia nodded approvingly. You're thinking like an investigator now. She pulled out a laptop. First step, we need to secure what we already have. I'm making digital copies of everything and encrypting them on secure servers. She also gave me a crash course in avoiding surveillance, using cash only, changing vehicles frequently, staying off social media, and using public computers for any online research. The Caldwells will be watching your usual contacts, she warned. Family, friends, anyone you might reach out to for help. So don't. Instead, we created a list of people connected to the case who might have information but weren't on the Caldwells' radar. Our first breakthrough came 3 days later, when Caroline Marshall called me back. After hearing a condensed version of what I'd discovered, she agreed to meet. I've spent my entire adult life looking for the truth about what happened to Bethany, she said when we met in a Portland cafe. If you really have evidence about the Caldwells' involvement, I showed her the photographs and some of Detective Mercer's notes. She studied them with tears streaming down her face. All these years, and they've just been living their lives, she whispered. Building careers, having families, while Bethany has been. She couldn't finish the sentence. Caroline had her own files to share decades of correspondence with police, private investigators, and journalists who had looked into the case over the years. Most had hit dead ends or been warned off, but their collective work painted a damning picture of the Caldwell's interference. She also connected us with two women who had attended Cedar Springs University at the same time as Bethany and had their own stories about the Caldwell brothers' fraternity. Both had reported assaults, but been pressured to withdraw their complaints. Meanwhile, Sophia tracked down a former fraternity member named Thomas Quinn, who had left Cedar Springs abruptly after Bethany's disappearance. He was now living in Arizona, working as a high school counselor. After multiple calls, he agreed to speak with us. "I've been waiting for this call for 40 years, he said, when we met via secure video chat. "I wasn't there the night Bethany died, but I heard enough afterward to know what happened. Richard was always volatile, especially when drinking. And Frank." He shook his head. "Frank was the one who convinced everyone to keep quiet, who coordinated the cover-up, said his father would protect us all if we stuck together. Thomas had left town because he couldn't live with the guilt, but fear had kept him silent. The Caldwells made it clear what would happen to anyone who talked. One guy who was thinking of coming forward had his scholarship revoked, his parents' business audited by the state, and suddenly found himself facing drug charges. The message was clear. With each person we spoke to, the network grew. A retired secretary from the district attorney's office who remembered files going missing. A former campus security guard who had been told to change his patrol report from the night of Bethany's disappearance. The widow of a man who'd owned the land where we now suspected Bethany's remains might be buried. Throughout this time, Frank continued his public appeals for my return. In a particularly manipulative interview, he brought out old photos of our family and spoke about our 40 years of happiness, while suggesting my disappearance might be related to early signs of cognitive issues he'd been too private to discuss publicly before. It was a masterful preemptive strike. If I came forward with accusations, I could now be dismissed as confused or mentally unstable. Amanda remained in custody, though her lawyer was fighting the charges vigorously. The case against her was flimsy, but served its purpose of discrediting her and keeping her contained. After 2 weeks of gathering evidence and testimonies, Sophia, Caroline, and I met to assess our position. "We have enough to go public," Sophia said. "Not with the full story yet, but with questions about the original investigation and the Caldwell's involvement, just enough to get other journalists interested." "What about Amanda?" I asked. "As long as they have her." "They're using her as leverage against you," Caroline said gently. "As long as you have the original evidence, they'll keep pressure on her." "Then I need to force their hand," I said, an idea forming. "I need to make them think they can get everything back from me directly. And I know exactly how to do it." I called Frank. After 2 weeks of searching for me, he was clearly shocked to hear my voice. "Annie? Where are you? Are you okay?" "I think you know I'm not okay, Frank," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Not after what I've discovered about you, about Richard, about Bethany Marshall." A long silence followed. "Whatever you think, you know." "I don't think. I know. I have the album, Frank. I have the recordings. I have Detective Mercer's files." Another pause. "We should talk, Annie. Just you and me. I can explain everything." "Like you're explaining things to Amanda? By having her arrested on false charges?" "That wasn't me," he said quickly. Richard and Gregory. They've overreacted. I can fix it. I can get the charges dropped. Just tell me where you are, and we can talk this through. I had anticipated this response. Frank had always been the negotiator, the reasonable one, the fixer. I'm not telling you where I am, but I'll meet you tomorrow, 2 o'clock, at the lookout point on Miller's Ridge. It was a public place, with multiple access roads, popular enough to have witnesses, but spacious enough for a private conversation. Come alone, Frank. If I see anyone else, I disappear, and everything I have goes straight to every news outlet in the country. He agreed immediately. After the call, Sophia objected strenuously to my plan. He's desperate. It's too dangerous. We've taken precautions, I reminded her. We had indeed multiple copies of all evidence secured with different people, Deadman switches set up to release information if I didn't check in, and Caroline positioned nearby with a long-range camera to document the meeting. What I didn't tell Sophia was that I needed this confrontation for reasons beyond our investigation. I needed to look my husband in the eyes and understand how the man I'd loved for 40 years could have lived with such a terrible secret. The next day, I arrived at Miller's Ridge 30 minutes early, parking in a spot with clear sightlines and multiple escape routes. At precisely 2 o'clock, Frank's silver Mercedes pulled into the lot. He got out alone, scanning the area before walking to the railing overlooking the valley. Even from a distance, I could see the toll the past weeks had taken. He looked thinner, grayer, diminished somehow. I approached from behind, stopping several feet away. "Hello, Frank." He turned, his face showing genuine relief. "Annie, thank God you're all right." "Am I?" I asked. "Is Amanda? Is Bethany Marshall?" His expression hardened slightly. "You don't understand what happened. Then explain it to me, Frank. Explain how you helped cover up a young woman's death. Explain how you've lied to me every day for 40 years. Explain why your family is destroying our daughter to keep your secret." "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice low. "Bethany threatened to expose Richard for assaulting her friend. There was a confrontation. Richard pushed her, and she fell against a stone fireplace. It was an accident you chose to cover up instead of reporting. We were young and stupid and terrified. Richard was facing law school. I was starting my judicial clerkship. We panicked. And afterwards, when you realized what you'd done, when her family was searching for her?" Frank looked away. By then, it was too late. My father had already intervened, already started managing the situation. We told ourselves it was a terrible mistake, but that ruining more lives wouldn't bring her back. "So you built your careers, your reputations, your political influence on her grave." My voice shook with anger. "And now you're doing the same thing to Amanda." "That's Richard's doing, not mine," Frank insisted. "He's always been the ruthless one. I've been trying to rein him in, to find a way out of this that protects everyone. Everyone except Bethany. Everyone except the other women your fraternity brothers assaulted." Frank stepped toward me, hands outstretched pleadingly. "Annie, we can fix this. I can make Richard back off Amanda. I can make this right." "How? By burying the truth again? By using your influence to make another cover-up?" "By telling the truth," he said, surprising me. "At least a version of it that gives Bethany's family closure without destroying everyone connected to the case. Richard was the one who pushed her. He's the one truly responsible." I studied my husband's face, seeing clearly for the first time the moral compromises etched into every line. "You're still trying to minimize your role, still trying to shift blame, still trying to manage the damage instead of accepting responsibility." "I'm trying to protect what matters," he countered. Our family. Our life together. Our life together has been a lie, Frank. Everything we built has been tainted by what you did. Then let me make it right, he urged. Give me the evidence. Let me go to Richard and Gregory with a plan for how we acknowledge what happened while controlling the narrative. Controlling the narrative, I repeated flatly. You mean continuing to manipulate the truth? I mean finding a solution that brings justice for Bethany while preventing unnecessary destruction. Richard is dangerous when cornered, Annie. He's already targeting Amanda. If this goes public without any control, he'll burn everything to the ground rather than face consequences. A chill ran through me. What exactly is Richard planning? Frank hesitated, then lowered his voice. He has people looking for you. Not just to find you, but to ensure you can't testify. And he's making arrangements to have Amanda transferred to a facility where he has influence. Once there, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. Help me stop him, Frank urged. Give me the evidence. I'll go to the federal authorities myself, negotiate immunity for Amanda and leniency for me in exchange for testimony against Richard. He's the one who killed her. He deserves to pay, not us. For a moment, I almost believed him. Frank had always been persuasive, always able to frame situations to his advantage. But something in his eyes, a calculation, a measurement of my reaction, gave him away. You're still lying, I said quietly. You're working with Richard right now, aren't you? This meeting is part of your plan. Frank's expression didn't change, but a slight tension in his shoulders confirmed my suspicion. Where are they, Frank? Waiting nearby to follow me? Or is Richard already at the bottom of the ridge, blocking the main exit? Annie. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Sophia, watching from her position, black SUV just arrived. 2 men inside. Getting out now. I backed away from Frank. You haven't changed at all. Still covering up. Still conspiring. Still putting your family's reputation above justice. You don't understand what's at stake, Frank said, dropping the pretense of reconciliation. We've spent decades building our position, our influence. I won't let you destroy that over something that happened 40 years ago. It's not me destroying anything, Frank. You did that when you chose to hide a young woman's body instead of taking responsibility. I turned to leave. Annie, wait. He grabbed my arm. I pulled away sharply. Don't touch me. We're done, Frank, and so is your family's cover-up. As I walked quickly toward my car, I could see 2 men approaching from the parking area. Richard wasn't taking chances this time. He'd sent professionals. I reached my vehicle just as they spotted me, quickening their pace. The engine started on the first try, and I accelerated out of the lot, taking the secondary exit Sophia and I had scouted earlier. In my rearview mirror, I could see Frank watching me go, phone already to his ear, no doubt calling Richard to report his failure. The trap had failed, but I had learned something crucial. The depth of Richard's desperation and the lengths he would go to silence anyone threatening his family's power. And most importantly, I had confirmed what we'd suspected. Frank was still actively participating in the cover-up, still choosing his family's reputation over the truth. As I drove to our predetermined meeting point, I realized that any remaining love I had felt for Frank had died during our confrontation. In its place was a steely resolve to expose the truth, whatever the personal cost. 3 days after my confrontation with Frank, the first article in Sophia's series appeared online. Questions resurface. In 1980, disappearance of Cedar Springs student. It didn't directly accuse the Caldwells, but raised pointed questions about the original investigation and noted the family's connections to key officials involved in the case. The response was immediate and fierce. The Caldwell family's attorneys issued blanket denials and threatened legal action. Local media, long friendly to the family, largely ignored the story. But online, it gained traction, especially when Caroline Marshall gave interviews sharing her decades-long search for answers about her sister. Sophia released new details every day, gradually building the case. Former fraternity members began coming forward with their own stories. Thomas Quinn went public with his knowledge of the cover-up. Linda Mercer shared her father's decades-long quest for justice. A week into the growing scandal, we executed the next phase of our plan. Using the digital copies of the most damning evidence, we bypassed traditional media entirely, releasing carefully edited versions on multiple platforms. Simultaneously, the photographs showing Bethany's body being moved, Frank's recorded confession, Detective Mercer's suppressed witness statements. The story exploded nationwide. Within hours, the FBI announced it was opening an investigation into Bethany's disappearance and the subsequent handling of the case. State police, under pressure from the governor facing his own re-election campaign, established a separate task force. The charges against Amanda were abruptly dropped with little explanation, and she was released into the custody of her attorney. Our reunion, in a safe house Sophia had arranged, was tearful and healing. "I was so afraid for you," she said, hugging me tightly. "When they arrested me, all I could think was that they'd find you next." I had excellent help, I told her, introducing her to Sophia and Caroline, who had become my partners in this fight for justice. As public pressure mounted, cracks appeared in the Caldwell family's united front. Gregory withdrew from his Senate race, citing family matters requiring my full attention. Frank disappeared from public view entirely, but Richard became more aggressive, giving combative interviews in which he dismissed the evidence as fabricated and the accusations as politically motivated. Then came the breakthrough we needed. Based on information in Detective Mercer's files and testimony from Thomas Quinn, investigators obtained a warrant to search a remote property once owned by Richard's college roommate. There, using ground-penetrating radar, they located human remains. DNA testing confirmed what we already knew: Bethany Marshall had been found at last. The case against Richard and Frank moved quickly after that. With the physical evidence recovered and multiple witnesses now willing to testify, prosecutors filed murder and conspiracy charges against Richard and accessory charges against Frank. Several former officials were also charged with obstruction of justice for their roles in the cover-up. Frank, facing the collapse of everything he'd built, made the decision that perhaps he thought would salvage what remained of his legacy. He offered to testify against his brother in exchange for a plea deal. On the day Frank was scheduled to provide his formal statement to prosecutors, Amanda and I sat in the district attorney's office, watching the man we had once loved prepare to finally tell the full truth. Frank looked diminished in his Navy suit, all his judicial authority and family pride stripped away. When he saw us, he attempted a smile that never reached his eyes. "Annie, Amanda, I want you to know—" "Save it for your statement, Mr. Caldwell," the prosecutor interrupted. "We're here for your testimony, not your personal amends." For the next 4 hours, Frank detailed the events of June 12th, 1980, and the 40 years of cover-up that followed. He described how Richard had struck Bethany in anger, how they had panicked when she died, how their father had orchestrated the initial cover-up and taught his sons that power meant never facing consequences. He admitted to using his position as a judge to block reopening the investigation whenever new evidence surfaced. He named officials who had been bribed or threatened into compliance over the years. And he confirmed that Richard had orchestrated Amanda's arrest and sent men to silence me. Throughout his testimony, I felt strangely detached. This man, whom I had loved and respected for decades, was a stranger to me now. His moral compass had been corrupted long before I met him, and everything we had built together had been shadowed by his secret. When the statement was complete, and Frank was led away to begin serving his reduced sentence, Amanda took my hand. "It's really over," she said quietly. "The cover-up is," I agreed, "but there's still justice to be done." The trials that followed dominated regional news for months. Richard Caldwell was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life. Frank received a 10-year sentence for his role as an accessory and for obstruction of justice, reduced from the potential 30 years due to his cooperation. Several former officials received sentences ranging from 2 to 5 years for their participation in the cover-up. For Bethany's family, the convictions brought long-awaited closure. At her proper funeral, 42 years after her death, Caroline spoke about her sister's spirit and the relentless search for truth that had finally brought her justice. "Bethany can rest now," she told me afterward. "And so can I." For Amanda and me, the path forward was less clear. Our family had been destroyed, our home life revealed as an elaborate fiction. But in its place, we found a new purpose and an unexpected strength. Using the settlement from our divorce and the proceeds from selling the house I could no longer bear to live in, I established the Bethany Marshall Foundation with Caroline. Our mission: to support investigations into cold cases and to advocate for victims whose voices had been silenced by wealth and power. Amanda returned to the FBI with a commendation for her integrity and was appointed to a new unit specializing in reviewing cold cases for signs of corruption or interference. Her experience made her uniquely qualified to recognize when influence was being used to obstruct justice. As for me, I found a small cottage near the coast, far from Cedar Springs and its painful memories. I began writing about my experience, not just as therapy, but as a warning about the corrosive effects of secrets and the courage required to face difficult truths. 1 year after Bethany's remains were laid to rest, Caroline, Amanda, and I stood together at the dedication of a memorial garden at Cedar Springs University. The plaque honored not only Bethany, but all victims whose cases had gone unsolved due to interference or indifference. As students passed by, some stopping to read the plaque or lay flowers, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. My life had been shattered, then rebuilt in a form I never could have imagined. The pain remained, but alongside it had grown a profound appreciation for truth, justice, and the strength that emerges from facing our darkest moments. "Are you okay, Mom?" Amanda asked, noticing my tears. "Yes," I said, and meant it. "I was just thinking about messages and warnings, how your text saved my life, how Bethany's courage in standing up to the Caldwells ultimately brought them down, even decades later." "The truth finds a way," Caroline said softly, "no matter how long it takes." That evening, alone in my cottage, I opened a new journal, not to record the past this time, but to plan for the future. The Bethany Marshall Foundation had already helped reopen 3 cold cases and secured funding for advanced DNA testing in a dozen more. I had learned the hardest lesson possible about blind trust and the facades people construct, but I had also discovered my own resilience and the power of choosing justice over comfort, truth over familiar lies. Sometimes a single message can change everything: a daughter's urgent text, a victim's cry for justice, a woman's decision to stand firm in the face of powerful men who believed themselves untouchable. Have you ever had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths? What would you risk to expose an injustice, even when doing so might cost you everything you thought you valued? I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find strength in knowing that it's never too late to seek justice and begin again. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember the courage to face truth is within each of us, waiting for the moment when it's needed most.